Phil, while we were all focused on the electoral map, we got some news on our old pal Fani Willis. Seems the voters down in Atlanta are not done with her yet.
No, and look, this is Fulton County after all, and it looks like Trump only took about 27-ish% of the vote. And of course, she being a Democrat, it just makes common sense that she's going to sort of ride this blue wave that's forever and ever going to exist in Fulton County. I'm just glad that our state in Georgia appears to have not become a national embarrassment, because we had some questions about whether another metro Atlanta County and Gwinnett County might have some voting irregularities, or at least some issues with how those machines counted the ballots in Gwinnett County. But it looks like we've dodged perhaps a national embarrassment bullet on that one.
Okay, so let's talk about lawfare, guys, because I think we all know that really, regardless of who wins, there's going to be lawfare after the fact. Do we think that? I mean, I think we think that. Don't we think that?
Depends who wins.
Yeah.
Does it?
I
don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Phil.
I do. Well, I do think, as far as Trump is concerned, that no matter what happens, he has that sentencing in New York on November, I think it's 17th. That's coming up, and that's going to be very interesting. If
we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second. We'll get to the criminal case against Trump in 1 second. I'm talking about the lawfare around this election. I feel like it's going to come either way. The reason I think that is I think if he wins, they're going to be calling him an insurrectionist again, trying to get him not installed, trying to get the vote not certified, maybe trying to push faithless electors. I think all of that's coming our way. Do you think Jamie Raskin is going to roll over and just accept Donald Trump's victory? Do you think that, Dave?
I do, actually. Yes. Democrats could grumble, but no, I don't think that they're going to try to do an insurrection or do alternate electors or any of the things that happened 4 years ago. No, Democrats, they can grumble, but they don't play the same game. So no, I don't think that's going to happen.
All right. How about you, Mike Davis? What do you think?
Well, it depends on how much President Trump wins by tonight, and it also depends on whether Republicans keep the House of Representatives. Look, they tried to bankrupt Trump. They tried to throw him in prison for the rest of his life for non-crimes. They're still trying to do that with that sentencing hearing in front of Judge Merchan in Manhattan on, I think it's November 26th. They've tried to take him off the ballot, and they underfunded his Secret Service protection, so they've tried to take off his head. That all didn't work. The American people, it looks like, have put President Trump back in the White House. And as you said, Megan, that Jamie Raskin seems pretty determined to try to block that on January 6th.
I would not bet that guy's going to go quietly into the night if Trump wins this. I'd be shocked. I know that they have said, we hate election deniers, we hate everything that Trump did, but they hate Trump more than the charge of hypocrisy. So that's what I think. I think they will fight. They'll fight legally. But now, if Kamala Harris manages to eke this out, and we do need to discuss this, if she does somehow manage to win these blue wall states, you guys, and it happens with the mail-in ballots late in the game, the way we saw in 2020, Mike, you tell me what's going to happen.
Look, I think that if you look at the way President Trump is trending with this election, I think he's going to win beyond that margin. I think he's going to win comfortably in these key swing states. He may win all 7 of these swing states. I don't see a scenario where the Democrats are going to be able to send in these late mail ballots and take this election for Kamala Harris.
Mm-hmm. If he wins, there will be the question either way, wins or loses, what happens to the lawfare against him? And I'll come to you in 1 second, Phil, and we'll talk about Atlanta. But let me start with Dave, who wanted to talk about the sentencing. Trump is scheduled at some point to go be sentenced for the conviction that was brought against him, that was achieved against him. But there is motion practice still pending on whether that trial needs to be redone, because they introduced evidence against him in the course of it that involved his time in the Oval Office, and in the wake of the Supreme Court ruling that you can't introduce evidence like that against a president, a former president. They may be in a real pickle on whether they can proceed to sentencing. So, Dave, what happens let's start with if he wins, what happens?
If he wins, he's going to have to still show up at the sentencing. That's going to be must-see TV. If only they had cameras in the courtroom in New York. They really should change that. And then he'll get sentenced by Judge Merchan. I don't know which way Judge Merchan's going to go. I know Mike and I had differed on that, which way they're going to go. I don't know. But I can tell you that if he wins, then he will not serve any sentence in New York. They'll postpone it. They'll stay it until after he's out of office. And then who knows what can happen 4 years later. So, and as far as the other cases, he will order his attorney general to drop the case in Washington, D.C., as well as the case that is in the 11th Circuit, the Mar-a-Lago documents case. And then you're left with the Fonnie Willis case in Phil's area. And that one, I think, is
Wait,
right now, is headed nowhere.
Before we get to that, Dave, will the DOJ comply if a newly reelected President Trump orders them to drop the two prosecutions?
Well, it'll be his own DOJ. He's going to appoint an attorney general, be like Kash Patel or someone, or Mike Davis. Mike Davis will be AG, and then drop everything.
I'm rooting for Mike Davis. I don't want to get ahead of myself on cabinet appointments.
Well, I'm hoping it's Mike Davis.
Yes, see?
Well, because that's the only way I'll stay out of Gitmo.
Yeah, as you guys all know, I'm too charming to get confirmed, and so I have 0% chance of ever being Trump's attorney general. But I will say this: look, President Trump's either going back to the White House or he's going to Rikers Island, and I think the American people are going to determine that tonight.
Okay, Phil. So Fannie Willis has not given this whole thing up. We had the judge who refused to DQ her, and it's being appealed, and it's not yet resolved. So what's going to happen with the case in Atlanta?
Well, so next month in December, there's oral argument before the Georgia Court of Appeals on the very issue of whether or not Fannie Willis, should be disqualified from further prosecution in this case. And look, the judges who are on that panel all come from pretty red areas of the state of Georgia. I'm not saying that politics creeps into the judicial system, but hey, sometimes it might. And I think particularly that if he wins this election, and it looks like he will tonight, I think that the Court of Appeals in Georgia is just going to have all the more reason to go ahead and disqualify Willis. And if that happens, this becomes an indictment without a prosecutor, because the Georgia, they have a state agency called the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. They would be tasked with potentially assigning it to another prosecutor, and no other prosecutor in their right mind in the state of Georgia is going to want to pick up the mantle and try to carry this prosecution across the finish line. They would have to start over from the very beginning, probably anyway, to clean up the mess that's been made by Willis. On the other hand, if I'm wrong and she's not recused from the case or dismissed from the case, I think that it's stayed pretty much indefinitely. I don't think the trial judge is going to want to proceed with any kind of active litigation against a potential sitting president of the United States. So one way or another, I am convinced that the Georgia case is dead in the water.
I'm convinced of that too. Dave, if he does lose, and the audience should be reminded, it is still possible. We don't have a call in one of those three blue wall states. And if she wins them all, she's going to be the next president. So if he loses, what happens with the New York case? That one did proceed to verdict. If the judge says, I'm not worried about that evidence we let in, I don't think that it would have affected the verdict, and I'm going to go ahead and proceed with sentencing, then what happens?
Yeah, then he'll sentence him, and then he'll go on appeal on the grounds you just said. And then I suspect an appellate court may rule that it's harmless error, or they may reverse it and send it back. I think it's probably harmless error. And then Trump will get sentenced in New York, and he'll have to go through with the sentence. He can only have so many delays. And then he'll also be put on trial in Washington, D.C. That's the next one to go, the election interference case. And then the 11th Circuit at some point soon is going to, I think, overturn Judge Cannon and reinstate the Mar-a-Lago documents case. I do agree with Phil. I think that the case in Atlanta is a non-starter. I don't see any end to that one, or that one will go to trial. So I think Trump is facing serious legal liability in those 3 cases, including potential incarceration.
You, Phil, you're shaking your head no on the 11th Circuit reversing. Just to keep the audience up to speed, we were talking about the Mar-a-Lago documents case where Trump took all those documents and then didn't give them over to the feds when they were demanded, and then the FBI raided his house. And the judge in that case threw out the case, saying Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, had not been properly appointed, that it could have been cured if they had just gone to a sitting U.S. attorney and said, would you please bring these charges? But they didn't. They really wanted to stick with Jack Smith. So you were shaking your head no when Dave was saying he thinks that ruling by Judge Aileen Cannon will be reversed by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals.
Yeah, I would have to respectfully disagree with my friend, but because I think the 11th Circuit, it's not carved in stone that they would reinstate the documents case. I think the argument that Jack Smith was illegally appointed is a pretty good argument. And let's remember, Donald Trump, if he wins, he can, of course, pardon himself. But regardless of whether that happens, if, let's say, the 11th Circuit does do the opposite of what I'm saying, that could be appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I think they have every incentive and every reason to take that case from the 11th Circuit and to rule on that issue. They've already dropped some hints, at least some of the justices have, that perhaps the appointment of Smith was an unlawful appointment. So I just don't see the document case being revived by the 11th Circuit. And if it is, if I'm wrong, I think it's going to be quite some time before that case would ever get back to the trial.
All right, last but not least, Mike, if Trump wins tonight, we're going to hear a lot on the left about Trump threatened to go after this one and Trump threatened to go after that one. And I literally heard Michael Cohen on MSNBC this week saying he's going to leave the country. He's getting a passport with a different name. He recommended that the MSNBC anchors do the same. So you tell me what he actually is likely to do with his Department of Justice. Do you think he will order the prosecution of his enemies as was done to him?
I don't think he's going to order a political prosecution for non-crimes like the Biden-Harris Justice Department and their allies in New York and Atlanta have done to him and his top aides, Steve Bannon, who went to prison, Peter Navarro, who went to prison, his supporters on January 6th, who were persecuted under the Supreme Court's Fisher decision, parents outraged by gender chaos in schools and the resulting rapes in bathrooms. They sent the FBI after them. I mean, it's Christians praying at abortion clinics while they give amnesty to Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and every scumbag Biden, BLM, Antifa, Hamas, trans terrorist, abortion industry activist. I mean, you're not going to see that during the Trump administration like the Biden-Harris administration has done to Trump.
Guys, we should know soon. We think we're going to know soon. Thank you all. Thanks for everything on this lawfare. I'm not done with you yet. I mean, we're definitely going to be talking about lawfare again, but you guys have been just stellar. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.